Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Matthew with Atlantic Computer Services, joining you again with Kevin Flowers from Wade Insurance. Kevin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on again.
Good, good. Glad to see you. Today we're getting a little, in the last couple of videos that we've done, we stayed very broad and very general about cybersecurity and cyber insurance. But today we're actually going to get pretty specific with HIPAA and HIPAA compliance because the healthcare industry is one that has just absolutely been ravaged over the last 18 months. And from some of the things that I've been reading here, what what hackers and everyone found was a bit of a um, unintentionally distracted industry. So everybody in the healthcare industry was looking left and dealing with COVID and dealing with um, infections and all the things that came along with that, with shutdowns. And hackers, meanwhile, went right and started penetrating practices, penetrating medical records. And I think one of the numbers I saw was that, yeah, attacks were up almost 40% in the second half of 2020 compared to the first half of 2020. And that's something that's really unusual. So, what that shows me anyway is that they started out doing some things in the first half of the year, found some things that they really liked, and went doubled down on it in the second half of the year. So, it was a tough year for healthcare providers. Um, and the scary thing about all that too is that it looks like the trend is only going to continue because along with finding out how they were able to get into these healthcare providers, they also found out that a lot of them aren't very well prepared for this kind of thing.
Mhm.
So from my perspective, that tells me that there are a lot of places out there who don't have proper cybersecurity um, measures in place. And I bet from your side of things, if they don't have the cybersecurity, they're almost guaranteed not to have the cyber insurance.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, especially with some stringencies in the underwriting process. Weak internal controls. It's just going to equal the ineligibility of securing the proper cyber insurance. So, insurance carriers understand this industry. They understand the hacktivism industry. They understand the healthcare industry. All these data driven industries, and they're in the business of transferring risk. So they're only going to assume enough risk to properly cover those that are taking the right protocols and installing the right safeguards, utilizing infosec security measures. It's they go hand in hand for sure.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that's really important for people to remember too is you're not going to get quality insurance if you're not taking the precautions that you need to take on the front end. And before we get into some of the precautions and things that you can take on the front end, we were talking before about uh, what the I guess the fallout is from a breach, and I think that's probably a great place to start because before you can understand what you need to do, you need to kind of understand what can happen to you.
Sure.
So I think the number you and I talked about before was, what was it, $150 per record is what people are looking at if something does happen.
Yeah, and that's per unique record. So if I'm in, a patient at a medical facility or a doctor's office, and say they have a history of 20 years of medical records, that's only one record. That's a common misconception is that, you know, I've got patients that they've been, I'm their primary care physician for 40 years. All those records count towards our count or a PII or PHI count, and it's unique records. That's one thing I always like to clarify. But it's a volume model for healthcare, so it's not like drilling it down to just one unique record. You could still have 35, 50, 100,000 patients in your EMR.
Over the course of many years, yeah.
Yeah, and HIPAA has a requirement that they may no longer be an active patient, but you still maintain that medical records as
Yeah.
required by HIPAA. So it's not like I moved to another state and I no longer go to this doctor's office. They still own that data while I was with them until that period of time when they can absolve that data.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too that for people to understand. um, that what the cyber criminals are after is just the information, because for them the information is power. It's not like they're trying to I think people have this misconception that hackers are all about these financial breaches where they're going to come in and they're going to wipe your bank account or something like that.
Right.
And yes, those people exist, but a lot more of them exist on the data side of things because they know that there is power in the information, that they can use twofold. So there are the ransomware attackers that basically gobble the stuff up like hungry hippos. They get all the information and they hold it until you pay for it,
Right.
right? And then there are the basically like the seriously bad actors who take all that information and then sell it out on the dark web, or they sell it out to other people who will go out and then use it for whatever financial gain. And I just think it's really important that people understand that, you know, it's more than just um, financial pieces and links to bank accounts that people are looking for. If you protect, or if you own people's information, if you own social security numbers or address information, even something as simple as a first name, a last name, and an email address, you'd be surprised how far somebody can go with just those three things.
Mhm.
It's really important to protect that kind of stuff. And you blew me away before we got started today. So let's say that a practice is breached, somebody is hacked, and now they've got to go through the whole process. This is not the kind of thing that it's gonna happen on Monday and get cleaned up by Friday. What are we talking about as far as what unfolds from all of that?
Yeah. So before we get to that point, you had mentioned, the two actors, and when we first started these, I made a comment, and I have to redact it, about, they're pretty honorable on these ransomware attacks. You pay the ransom, they give you the encryption key, and it's business as usual. Um, what you described are being combined now, after learning some more, and you have a lot more dual actors that have, as thieves do, live by the motto of there is no honor among thieves. So they're encrypting the data, they're collecting the ransom, and they're still selling that data on the back end, because you have people that greed takes over. So you had these kind of you know good bad people that were doing what they said they would do, but then the bad people came in and ruined this criminal enterprise that was pretty sophisticated and had a lot of customer service to it back then. But now they're selling the digital assets and the data on the back end as well, because it's another profit center for them. So great point about how they're using the data in a ransom capacity and a sales capacity on the back end. But now they're doing both, and that's something to also be aware of. So what that does, what we're going to talk about, that drives up all those back end costs as well. It prolongs the amount of time after a breach or an incident occurs, and that's just twofold. I mean, it's bad for everybody. But they're finding that these threat actors are spending more time in the victim's environment, so they're learning about the business, they're learning about the data. They're finding opportunities to laterally move within the entry point that they made. They're encrypting data, they're encrypting backups. There's just, it's become so sophisticated quicker than folks like you and myself and the insurance industry and the service provider industry can stay ahead of it. So when they've spent this much time and they've potentially been extracting data already, and I was looking at the HIPAA journal before we were talking, and they identified it as something like the average time in the network before it's detected is 186 days.
Oh, that's
Um,
incredible.
that's over a year to be in, or close to a year to be into someone's network to learn a lot about them. What's really alarming for my industry is they've become so sophisticated that they're looking to see if companies have cyber insurance, see what their limits of coverage are, so they can kind of draft their demand based off what they know the insurance company will cover. If there is an insurance, they're looking at balance sheets. They're becoming accountants and saying, okay, well, they have this much cash flow, so we can or they have this many assets, we can, base our ransom off of, what we think they'll actually be able to pay, and leverage that. So, I mean, the sophistication is getting absurd. You have accountants and insurance consultants at this point that are, are hackers that have become those things. It's kind of crazy.
So a good example of how that happens. Now, we had a client who wasn't in the healthcare industry, but this is how that kind of thing happens. Turns out we were monitoring all of these devices for this client, except for one remote employee who was actually several states away that we found out about later. So by the time we got our monitoring equipment set up on there, the email for that employee had already been compromised. And so what we saw was at one point they reported some kind of unusual activity. We were able to go in and actually watch behind the scenes what the threat actor was doing. And so here's how the breach worked. So what they did was they set up, in your email, you've got your emails, but usually off to the left or to the right, you've got these folders. So folders have auto forward rules that you can set up. And what the hacker had done was set up a sub folder that was deep and buried that no one would ever find, and set up auto copy rules or auto forward rules that included things like subject line includes invoice, subject line includes payment, subject line includes HR or payroll or anything like that. And what they do is, like you said, it's not like they're picking a lock, they break in and then they snatch everything and then they've got it. Mm-hmm. They get in and they learn everything that they can about what's going on for months at a time. I mean, 180 days is forever to be invested in that kind of thing, and you never even know that this has been going on the whole time. And it just does speak to the level of sophistication that these people put into this kind of thing, which is why I think a lot of people don't quite understand what they're up against. Because it just doesn't even, I mean, we're in the industry and it's still mind-boggling when we finally find out how people are actually pulling this kind of stuff off. I can't even imagine, to not be in that kind of industry and have to wrap your mind around what it takes. And, there's always that feeling of, sure, that happens to them, but that would never happen to me. I'm too small. Or that would never happen to me. Nobody wants what we have. We don't have things that people want. You kind of do. Yeah. I mean, if you take any form of payment, if you have any form of personal information, you're exactly what somebody wants.
Yeah, and we talked about this, and a huge expense of a breach is, it doesn't really apply to healthcare, but it can at the same time. Your data and your access to that data may not seem valuable, but it's valuable to you operating as a company. So, leave your computer at home one day, sit down in your desk at your office and try and work. That's essentially what a breach looks like. You can't do a lot without access to however you manage your data and manage your business. And everything is managed now on your computer, whether it's retail, manufacturing, doctors' offices, technology service providers. I mean, everything has to have access to a network. Without it, one of the biggest drivers of that extended period of time is that business interruption cost. And covering that properly, and having the right safeguards in place to limit that business interruption is crucial.
So circling back to HIPAA specifically, when it comes to a data breach for a healthcare provider or a healthcare office, let's say the action has taken place, everything's been found, and now we've got to deal with it. What are some of the things that make healthcare providers, healthcare offices, what do they have to deal with specifically with regard to HIPAA and other things?
Yeah, definitely. So, we did a recent cyber index, which is, an estimate of a cyber incident and the back end costs associated with it. And there's essentially four main, tangible costs that we have data to put into this calculator. The first being the incident investigation. So that's having a third party come in, do forensics, identify and contain the event, limit the spreading of it, identify where and how it entered into other parts of your network or connected devices. Um, your next is data restoration, so that's rebuilding of those digital assets. Making sure that you go back to your most recent non-affected backup, because again, the encryption of your backups occurs now as well, and then restoring from that period forward with whatever is available. So that could require a lot more diligence within that third party in your company. So again, that's pulling your resources out to deal with this cyber breach. Next, crisis management. So trying to do damage control, setting up call centers, notifying people via mail. If you've got 50,000 unique records and postage is 50 cents now, I don't know, I haven't sent a letter in forever, but that's thousands of dollars just to send letters to notify what you're required to do to every single person that was affected. So if you're seeing that, you have a notification sublimit of $5,000 or $10,000, that's just not sufficient, and you're going to be left on the hook. And likely your other corresponding parts of your cyber insurance policy are also going to be sublimited or non-existent, and you'll end up picking up the bill. But the driver of the cost of these claims is the fines and penalties from HIPAA. HIPAA kind of for the construction and manufacturing industry is the OSHA. And when you hear those OSHA or HIPAA, you're going to get some fines levied. Other than government funding, their revenue comes from fining people. So HIPAA is going to levy some substantial fines, and on top of that, not allow you to operate without putting those controls in place that you should have had in the first place. So it's kind of like not getting ahead of it just is going to make it so much worse. And I think that people are realizing that, companies are realizing that, and can't get folks like yourself that are finding themselves super busy because these incidents are just they're picking up, and it's causing like so many other industries right now. It's a workflow issue, and shortage of labor, and to get people to do these things because there's just a high demand for it.
Yeah, it's really like I said, I think that a couple things are working against healthcare providers right now. One of those was they are incredibly busy.
Yeah.
They are still dealing with everything that they were dealing with last year. The hackers have realized that and that they are able to get in and take advantage of somebody who's basically got their arms full with actual work right now, and is trying to do a lot of things a lot faster. And when you're trying to do things faster, that's when mistakes tend to happen. And then, I was really kind of surprised to hear you say about how these ransomware attacks have evolved into just being, like you said, it used to be, I got your data, give me the money, I'll give it back to you. But now even that has evolved into a more dangerous side of things where people don't even care about them, that they're not even as interested in the ransom anymore because it probably is just quicker to sell the information.
Yeah.
But, that's it. There are just a ton of things that are working against the healthcare industry. And then to have the HIPAA violations and fines to come in on top of that. And one thing we haven't even touched on yet is the reputation management that has to come along with that, because cash layouts and cash fines are one thing. Wait till that class action lawsuit comes out and everybody sees that, there's a legal team recruiting patients to file a class action lawsuit against you. There's really, now you've got to hire PR. Now you've got to handle, like you said, the call center before. You've got to announce that kind of thing to people. I mean, it's just one big egg on your face case from top to bottom.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point. IT is a cost center. It's no different than legal, finance, HR. But I think that in the last couple of years, it's really taken a backseat to revenue generating function. So a medical office is, it's a revenue generating business. And, like we talked about earlier, it's a volume based business. So, revenue generation is what's driving that. And, IT and legal, finance, HR, those things can sometimes take a back seat, and it's, nothing done wrong. It's just a business model for every industry. So,
Right.
we always like to talk with, our clients and prospects about, balancing your revenue generation to, your risk control, and making sure that you're balancing your cost centers appropriately.
Yeah, and if you're gonna grow your business, that's just the name of the game. I
Right.
mean, there comes a point where, yes, revenue generation, but you're gonna reach a point where you've done all the work. Now you've got to protect what you've got.
Right.
So speaking of protection, what kinds of things, if someone was to come to you about what they needed to do, what kinds of things are you looking for before you can say, yes, we're going to take you on, we're going to assume the risk for you as your cyber insurance provider?
Yeah, definitely. This is really relevant. I was on another webinar yesterday, and we'll drop a link to that with North Carolina Technology Association, and had some executives with Blue Cross Blue Shield, RTI International, Lumen, LexisNexis, all in the CIO position and CISO position. And here I am, just an insurance broker in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I
You're more
tried to
than
roll.
just an insurance broker to us.
So I tried to keep up with them, but I think across the board, everyone's kind of astounded as to you know what the insurance companies are, or how much controls they're putting in place to get cyber insurance. There's so many insurance products that people are like, buy, we want to sell it to you. But then there's some insurance products that are really hard to get, and I think
Hmm.
cyber liability is becoming one of those because it's an active claims insurance product. It has one of the highest activities between or of insurance products. So they're looking for companies that are utilizing email filtering, identifying phishing attempts, have software updates and patching protocols, or doing employee trainings, have an incident response plan. All those tools that we've talked about in other videos. They're great to be proactive, but we're finding those are necessary to be compliant for HIPAA. They're necessary to get insurance. They're necessary for all these other things now, not just to keep the IT industry alive. This is a necessary business cost, and without utilizing those things, you run into a gamut of other issues in operating your business.
Yeah, one of the big things that when we talk about, again, going back to the healthcare industry specifically, when we're talking with our clients or we're talking with a new client about what we need to put in place, gone are the days of just sticking antivirus on your machines and then setting it and forgetting it.
Yeah.
So what we encourage people to do now in our plans is what we call building rings of protection. So all the things that you just mentioned, email filtering, spam protection, remote backups is a part of that process, because not just backing up things on site, because like you mentioned before, part of the data breach is to encrypt the backups. And if the backups are on the network, then there's no sense in having the backups.
Right.
But again, antivirus is a big thing. And employee training, we just did the video on it, and I'll share a link to that as well under this video. But all that stuff doesn't even matter if an employee opens a phishing email and lets the hacker in. It's the equivalent of opening the front door and letting them in the front door when you've got all the windows and the back door barred.
Yeah.
So I think that it makes a lot of sense for me, of course, that all of these things are necessary pieces to a good insurance plan, because if you see that someone is doing all of those things, then you've got to feel pretty good about where they are as a company with regard to protection.
Yeah. Right. Again, and you're going to the insurance company to transfer risk off your balance sheet. That's the reason you purchase insurance. They're there to maintain their own balance sheet. So, use health insurance as an example. If you have, pre-existing conditions, are a smoker, or overweight, or all these health related issues, it's hard to get health insurance. And same with cyber insurance. If you don't have good cyber hygiene and aren't taking care of your, cyber liabilities, it's hard to get someone else to want to cover those as well. And that's where the industry is trending right now.
I'm going to steal cyber hygiene, by the way. I'm going to write that down
It's a good one.
change all my marketing materials. Well, this has been great, Kevin. I think that this is, we could probably go another 2 hours on this topic. Again, the healthcare industry is one that's very, very unique in the way that a lot of these things have to happen. And also just, it's just super important because of all of the sensitive information that healthcare providers have access to and what they manage for their patients. But I think we gave it a good overview. We talked about, what happens in the event of a breach. We talked about the fact that it's only escalating in the healthcare industry. I think one thing I saw was that they are forecasting. Next year is forecasting like a 300% increase in attacks over 2020. So what that says is, we talk about the ever evolving hacker mentality and hacker ability, the level of skill that these people have. When they figure something out and they realize that the industry that they're targeting is poorly prepared, it's blood in the water. I mean, it's going to be nuts. So our goal, and I'm sure your goal, is to reach as many people and protect as many people as possible so that we can keep that from happening.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for checking this out today. We will put some information for you where you can contact Kevin or myself with any questions that you have about cyber insurance or about cybersecurity, and we'd be happy to help you out with that. If you need information about, just want to kind of a quick check on where you might stand with HIPAA compliance with regard to cybersecurity, we can help you with that kind of thing. If you want to check up on where you're, if you have existing cyber insurance coverage and you want to see where that stacks up, we can help you with that as well. So we'll have links for all that at the bottom. If you have any general questions that you'd like to ask, drop them in the comments below and we'll tackle them there. But thanks again so much for watching, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.